The hook of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a massive subversion of the original story, which is definitely rubbing some people the wrong way. This series was basically advertised as a faithful retelling of the graphic novels, only for that to be upended by the end of the very first episode, when Scott is seemingly defeated by Ramona's first evil ex-boyfriend, Matthew Patel, instead of defeating him as seen in the book and movie. A ridiculously bold move that, in my opinion, pays off obscenely well. Because while this is definitely a subversion of the existing narrative, it also ends up being a total celebration of that narrative. Instead of a retelling of a story that we've already gotten, we're basically delivered a sequel to that story that unpacks so many aspects of those narratives from entirely new angles. And the truth is, we wouldn't have gotten new Scott Pilgrim content at all, ever, if this wasn't the approach, because creator Brian Lee O'Malley wasn't interested in simply retelling the same story again, which I think shows a ton of integrity on his part. In fact, it wasn't until he was having dinner with co-writer Ben David Grabinski that he found any interest in revisiting the property. Grabinski said this in his Rolling Stone interview. "We had a long talk about those things he was feeling, about not wanting to redo it. We talked about thematic reasons to revisit it, like spending more time with Ramona or more time with the exes, and at some point I blurted out, kind of as a joke, what if you just have Scott seemingly die at the end of the first fight with Matthew Patel? And then what if you made a movie about Scott Pilgrim starring Lucas Lee?" Right after I said that, Brian immediately sparked to it. And honestly, going into Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, I was starting to get a little concerned. For one, the season was only 8 episodes long, and yet seemed to feature every evil ex, implying that they were once again about to give us an abridged retelling of the graphic novels instead of a multi-season detailed retelling. I was also very iffy about the decision to use the entire movie cast, given that the project would just immediately be even more directly compared to the very popular movie version. It felt like maybe this should just exist in its own space. But once it became clear that this story was giving us something new, those decisions made so much more sense, especially because I think this show absolutely works best if you are familiar with the books and/or movie. I know Grabinski has said that it's meant to work separate of the previous versions, but personally, I think it really stands on the shoulders of the previous versions, which is why reusing the film cast actually elevates this version rather than distracts. Being somewhat familiar with the characters and even with these actors' performances of those characters makes this one so much more rewarding. And they sort of call this idea out in one of the only pieces of significantly altered dialogue in the opening episode, when Scott tells Ramona about the two drastically different versions of Sonic from the 90s.
And the same guy played Sonic in both shows. Isn't that wild? The same guy playing two different versions of the same guy?